Ora si registrerà la conferenza.
Okay, so welcome to everybody again. I'm going to give the floor to the president of ICOM Italy, Adele Maresca Compagna.
Good morning, good afternoon. I would like to welcome everybody and especially the distinguished speakers who have kindly accepted to participate from different countries, different parts of the world in this meeting that proposes a reflection and a comparison of good practice on relationship between museums and public art, and solicits the attention of ICOM's international community and museum professionals on this theme. In fact, the museum strongly connected to the topic of a cultural landscape, particularly relevant from ICOM and for the Italian committee, who chose it as a theme of the ICOM Milano 2016 General Conference, must play an active role today in urban policies. It can be exposing the object of their collection in outdoor spaces, promoting contemporary artistic creativity, contributing to the study and diffusion of knowledge, as well the conservation of the historical testimonies of the territories. This is exactly what we would like to discuss with you today. Thanks to his specialized skills and its mission at the service of the communities, museum can also trigger, above all in the younger generation, critical processes of discussion and sharing of the meaning and values expressed in other historical periods in the monumental emergency of the city. For these reasons, the cooperation of museums professionals with those responsible for protection and with city administration in the field of commissioning and conservation of public art can be particularly fruitful. And now I give the floor to Tommaso Sacchi, assessor to culture of City of Milan, that promoted and organized with us this webinar, and I thank very much for his presence here.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well, but I see from the faces on the desktop that everyone is hearing my voice properly. So thank you so much for inviting me to give a second introduction to the ICOM meeting of today, Museums, Public Art and City as Participatory Cultural Spaces. It's a great privilege for me to give a figurative welcome in Milano to everyone, to the international speakers and to all the colleagues that are connected to the webinar today. I see on my screen that Marina Pujas is with me, so she's representing the administrative direction and general direction for public art of the municipality of Milano. And me as a deputy mayor for culture, it is my pleasure to be here today to welcome you all and to introduce the conference, even though I would be concise in consideration of the length of the complexity of the contributions that would be given to the meeting of today. As you all know, Milano was one of the first cities harshly hit by a pandemic COVID-19. So during the first wave of the pandemic, the municipality of Milano shared a questionnaire with the city inhabitants, with the citizens of Milano in Milano 2020, in order to hear the requests, the priorities for possible adaptation strategies after the most acute phases of the lockdowns. Milanese people asked for more green areas, for public art and culture all over the neighborhood of the city, So it was a very important survey to see how, in a very dramatic moment, the culture and the presence of art all over the city is a key, representing a key role for the rebirth after the pandemic for the city of Milan. So this is exactly and precisely what is pushing us to work on the direction of the public art. So this is how and what we are working on now. We are invested in an expanded idea of culture in the city, considering the specificity of the different neighborhoods of Milano, and including the different forms of public art. So we have founded the Public Art Office as first city, as you know, in Italy to found this office, this bureau that is held by Marina Pujas, she's with me today, as a presence, as a contributor of this conference, with the idea of creating a responsive apparatus to speculate about how the city is changing itself. So as well as this bureau, as well as this direction of our administrative offices of culture, is able to work on how people are changing, how the habits are changing in the city, and how art can shift to meet these newly identified public desires. So this conference and the collaboration with ICOM is one of the first steps for us in our commitment to a new approach towards the public art for the city of Milan. So with these few words, I want to wish everyone a successful and fruitful conference on the idea that together we can work properly on these thematics that I shortly introduce with my speech. So thank you so much for inviting me, and have a good afternoon of work together.
Thank you so much, Assessore Sacchi. It would be the term of Marco Minoia, who is the General Director of the Cultural Department for the City of Milan. Unfortunately, he cannot join us, but he asked me to welcome you. And I have to add that Marco Minoia was the person who envisioned and realized the need for funding a public art department for the city of Milan, and he welcomed the possibility for us to collaborate with ICOM Italy. So let's dive into my speech. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen. And play. Can you see that? Is that okay?
Yes, Marina, thank you.
Yes, it is. Great. Okay. So first of all, I really want to thank ICOM Italy, ICOM in general, Alberto Garlandini, ICOM Italy, and the president Adele Maresca, and Barbara Landi, who have really supported this symposium and welcomed our idea of treating this complex topic and sharing this discussion on an international platform. I'm Marina Pujas. I'm the head of public art for the City of Milan, and I'm faculty for the Art History and Visual Culture Department at the California College of the Arts. So the topic today is museums, public art, and cities as participatory cultural spaces. And it's important to share a definition of the word participation, which is kind of a buzzword and therefore also a slippery word in the world of culture in general and museums specifically. So in the words of Nina Simon, a participatory cultural institution is a place where visitors can create, share, and connect with each other around content. This is the end of the quote. But the pandemic we are still living through exacerbated the disconnection between cultural institutions and their public. And in this gap, the fundamental role of outdoor spaces was evident. It has been emphasized. And so how can we reconnect with a disconnected public? And also, which kind of public are we talking about? This image by Ayora and Calzadilla, which is a duo of Puerto Rican artists, shows a work, Chalk, which has been replicated various times since 1988 and in different places around the world. But you can see the difference. On the left is at the Walker Art Institute in Minneapolis, and in the right is in a square in Mexico. So this work specifically is provides a forum for participants to exchange idea. Basically, it's all focused on the presence of these big pieces of chalk, human-sized sticks of chalks, which people can use freely. And but the point is the urban public space any freer than museums? And are museums really considered public spaces? What is the perceived publicness of places for culture? What's interesting about this work is that at the end, it becomes kind of a portrait of the community which is participating into this activity. Most museums are situated in city center. But, public art instead can be produced anywhere and can reach out to that kind of public which Mary Jane Jacob 20 years ago defined unfashionable public, contributing to the diffusion of the cultural offering in terms of diversity and inclusion. This is the mural piece we have inaugurated this morning with Councillor Tommaso Sacchi in Baggio. Baggio is a peripheral neighborhood in Milan, and it's a project, it's an ongoing project of murals which talk about a specific neighborhood, telling the name of the neighborhood. You can see it on the left, Baggio, but also with some identitarian elements of the history of that neighborhood. But above all, it's a participatory project, and in this case, it was produced with the students of a middle school. It's
Marina, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it seems like your mic is having some problem. So we hear, I don't know if you can, maybe you have something close to your microphone that it's disturbing.
Maybe I was covering it with some papers. Can you, now is it better? Yeah. Is it any better?
Now
okay.
It's totally better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was handling some papers. Okay,
no problem.
Okay. So during the lockdown and during the aftermath of the lockdown, we have all seen how public art was crucial to keep, alive the function of museums and the experience for the arts, which are crucial for a vital and a healthy society. So this work you're seeing here, Body of a Building by Norma Jean, artist Norma Jean, is a set of lightings which was installed on the facade of the Quadriennale building in Rome and was connected to the body of the artist, transmitting real-time data about the breath of the artist. So basically the lights were going were changing due to the breath of the artist. And obviously this work was talking about all the political and social implication to the act of breathing in a time of contagion. What's interesting is that after the exhibition opened, there was a second wave of COVID, and so the exhibition closed, shut down again, and so basically this was the only work which was available for pedestrians. And then after the lockdown, there was a curfew, and so basically the only people who were able to look at this work were police car going around, ambulance drivers, and street sweepers. So while some museums are connected directly with the urban space in an inherent way, for instance, the museums of the city, most museums still function mostly inside their own walls. And there's not that much connection with the public realm. And also, this is true also for contemporary art museums. In fact, when COVID hit at the beginning, museums mostly shifted to the digital, and they have mostly focused on the digital instead of exploring opportunities of going, you know, out, so to speak, outdoor, or jumping off to the public space. So this work you're seeing here, it's a work by American artist Lawrence Wiener, Traces, which was produced by the Macro Museum in Rome, which was one of the few contemporary art museums in Italy working, you know, with public art, and basically through this aerial banner, giving the chance to people around the coast, the Roman coast, to see some art and think about the meaning of words which had been removed from their syntactic context. But the pandemic also had another effect, which was to give monuments a new visibility. I mean, all the debate around monuments had already started before, but obviously during the pandemic, with the Black Lives Matter movement, this became, you know, really strong. And for instance, in this example, you can see how it's a Confederate monument in Charlottesville. And after the governor announced that the museum, the monument was going to be removed, and then other ballerinas, African-American ballerinas, decided to perform at the bottom of the monument. And this was quite a strong political statement. So basically, even though once monuments were fading, lately their symbolic values have been reread due to contemporary sensibility. And there's an international debate and requirements for alternative requests for alternative narratives and restorative justice. But it's a very complex and delicate topic which encompasses diverse historical experience, traditions, and communities. At this time, commissioning or anyhow taking decision on public monuments is an increasingly complex proposition which requires careful consideration. This is an example of the recontextualization of a bas-relief in Bolzano, northern Italy. It's a work by a sculptor, Hans Piefrader, which was produced during the fascist period between the two wars, and which was basically celebrating the triumph of fascism. And in 2017, this work has been recontextualized thanks to a project by artists Arnold Hostzek and Michele Bernardi, through an illuminated inscription with a quotation by philosopher Hannah Arendt, stating no one has the right to obey, written in the three languages spoken in that Italian region, Italian, German, and Latin. And moreover, on top of that, an info point was installed next to this artwork, talking about the history of the monument, the history of the city, and obviously talking about the meaning for this recontextualization for the monument. So in this complex moment of rediscussing about monuments and their values, it is important to share policies at a national and international level. But the point is there are no shared guidelines at an international level. So regarding monumentality, many questions stay open, and we organized a seminar on monumentality and anti-monumentality at the California College of the Arts, and Romy Crawford, which is a professor at the Art Institute of Chicago and the author of Fleeting Monuments for the Wall of Respect, was one of our guests, and talking about alternative way to memorialize underrepresented community, she posed a few questions, which I believe are really strong to keep in mind. So what history is being memorialized? Can it be a minor history? Does it need to be heroic in size? Can it be ephemeral? How will it age? Can it be portable and mobile? Does it need public sanction? Does it need public funding? And public arts is just, it's much more than just monumental pieces. And here we have some example of works produced in Milan. And it includes historical artworks, of course, but also contemporary art, murals, projections, sound artworks, billboards, installations, performances. It can be long-lasting or it can be ephemeral. It can be installed in parks, squares, on the facade of buildings or inside public buildings. It can be distributed in print, shared virtually, and more. It can be planned by art institution, governmental agency, real estate developers, or it can appear through more informal actions. So given all this diversity of actors who place art, there is often also controversy around political and cultural meanings expressed and disagreement about the relative value of the artworks. And also, this diversity of creators, medias, and form creates special challenges in terms of documentation, conservation, contextualization, and communication. And that's how and why it seems important to share new strategies and promote and reconsider public art with a pluralistic and participatory approach. Artworks in the public realm are still not as studied, as documented, as conserved and promoted as artworks pertaining to museums' collections. Also, public art tends to often emphasize the product over the process. So how about all the intermediate products, such as sketches and models? For instance, there's just one museum of art in the public spaces, which is specifically devoted, up to what I know, to the conservation of model and sketches in public art. So finally, an international discussion will be generative and valuable for thinking about new strategies. And we will touch various topics in the keynote speeches, and then later on in the roundtable section with the representatives of national and international ICOM committees. So it's time for our first keynote speaker. Let me stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, Marina, for your presentation, but we lost you. Can you hear us? Okay, so it seems she is encountering some problems. I take the opportunity to welcome new participants, as I saw that many people connected. So just to inform you that we are registering the session and that you can put your questions on the chat. You can find the icon on the right upper part of the screen. So I think that, yeah, Marina is encountering some technical problems.
Yeah, I don't know.
She's back. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. For some reason, I've been kicked out of the system. Okay, I'm back again. Give me just 1 second.
Okay, don't worry, and thank you again for your speech, Marina.
Thank you. Okay. Barbara, maybe you can help me with the biography of Joanne, because I don't find it. Sorry. Okay, no, I found it. Here it is. Sorry again.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Great.
So welcome to our first keynote speaker, Joanne Weinstein. Joan is director of the Getty Foundation. Since joining the Getty, she has directed grant initiatives related to art history, conservation, and museum practice internationally, including programs in South America, North Africa, and the Middle East. She was co-director of the Getty Pacific Standard Time, Art in LA, 1945-1980. Throughout her career, she has served on a number of nonprofit boards, and she's currently a trustee of the Mike Kelly Foundation for the Arts. Dr. Weinstein began her career teaching art history at the University of Pittsburgh and is the author of several books and numerous articles on the history of modern art in Weimar, Germany. She holds a PhD in the history of art from the University of California, Los Angeles, and studied at the Philipps Universität Marburg in Germany. Welcome, Joan, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you to ICOM. And let me see if I can get this screen set up here. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you today about a very expanded notion of public art, one that is actually composed of the museums in a way as the public art. And it is something called Pacific Standard Time, which is actually more than a time zone in which I'm located at the moment, early in the morning. And Pacific Standard Time has become a signature public art event in Southern California that has been led by the Getty and is actually what we think is the most extensive collaboration among nonprofit museums and visual arts organizations anywhere in the world. The first iteration of Pacific Standard Time opened in 2011 and had more than 60 simultaneous thematically linked exhibitions, hundreds of public programs, and a performance art festival. And it was accompanied by a very ambitious marketing and communications campaign, and in some ways put Los Angeles on the international map for the visual arts and recognized as a city that had a much longer history than people had assumed. Museums themselves constituted the public art venues, although there was also a great deal of public art and performance art during Pacific Standard Time. One museum director described Pacific Standard Time as LA becoming one large museum, with each museum serving as a gallery and the freeways serving as the corridors between the galleries, an apt metaphor for the sprawl of Los Angeles. In the end, I think Pacific Standard Time did a number of things that I'm going to walk you through in the time I have with you. First, it created a large-scale model for collaboration among cultural organizations, something I think that was unique to Los Angeles and its collaborative spirit. It created recognition for the history of Los Angeles art from 1945 to 1980, and for Los Angeles as a cultural destination for the visual arts. It expanded audiences, particularly for small and mid-sized diverse arts organizations in our region. And it generated more than 280 million in increased revenue and thousands of jobs in the region. In truth, though, it set out to do none of those things. And I'll share with you the journey of how it came to be and the ongoing challenges presented by such a large-scale collaboration that continues right now. Now, one of the things is it takes an organization with considerable resources like the Getty, or a municipality, a city or a municipality, to be able to mount something of this size. And for those of you who don't know the Getty, it's actually made up of 4 parts: a museum, a research institute, a conservation institute, and the foundation. And I represent the foundation, which is the philanthropic or the grant-making arm, which is what made this possible. Pacific Standard Time actually began as an archival project. We heard that the records of artists, gallerists, and dealers from this time period were actually being discarded, oftentimes at their death, and the family member would put them out on the sidewalk to be removed by the trash. We wanted to safeguard these archives and help to process them and make them available to scholars. As we were doing this, we realized that these archives told a very different story of the history of the development of modern art in the post-war period, far different from the narrative told particularly from New York. Los Angeles was the birthplace of the light and space movement, of Finnish fetish art, of one of the real centers of the development of contemporary African-American art and of Latino art. And it was the place of the first feminist art program in the United States. As we saw what these archives represented, we decided that rather than just support some scholarly publications based on the archives, we would support some exhibitions and bring this to a broader public. And we started with about 4 institutions that seemed interested in working with us. We began with them supporting 2 years of research in the archives to plan for these exhibitions. Then, as the word spread, more and more organizations, museums, visual arts organizations, came to us saying, we really want to participate in this too. And we took a very democratic approach. Each museum could propose its own topic so that there was no real unified voice to this, no overarching narrative. It worried us a bit, but we plunged ahead anyway. And we wound up supporting more than 35 exhibitions in this research phase, everything from our large encyclopedic museum, LACMA, to a high school art gallery, and to very small arts organizations in diverse communities in Los Angeles. We provided a second round of funding to bring these exhibitions to life, to implement them, and to publish catalogs which were based on the new research that was done during those first 2 years of work. Eventually, more than 30 other museums and arts venues joined us without grant support, wanting to be part of this large endeavor. And then the galleries, the commercial galleries, wanted to join in as well. We also developed the idea of a performance art festival to take place during Pacific Standard Time over 10 days, because performance art had been so seminal to the development of Los Angeles art in this period. It brought the art out of the museum into public spaces, and it created real porosity between museums and public spaces. A number of the organizations also were presenting the history of mural art in Los Angeles, even reviving some murals that had been thought lost and bringing them out into public spaces again. So we had these dozens and dozens of exhibitions, hundreds of public programs being planned, and a performance art festival. And we realized that we were going to need a communications and marketing campaign, something that was not on a scale that any individual institution had done before. And we actually engaged a marketing agency and a PR firm. And there were a lot of challenges in this new model. We had institutions that were well known in the city and others that were completely unknown and were really small and had never ever advertised themselves to a public before. We had a long duration. It went for 6 months, which was a challenge in making it sustainable and to keep an audience interested in it. We were appealing in some ways to different geographies. Our PR campaign was actually a global campaign and to attract visitors to Los Angeles. But most of our effort was a regional focus, trying to bring in new audiences who had not participated, who had not gone to museums before. And we distinguished this audience as those we had to appeal to that core art audience, what we called the art aware, but we also had to address what we called the culturally curious, those who might appreciate music, attend music venues, or perhaps be interested in food culture, but were not regular museum goers. So you have to remember this is 2011, and this is before we really had large-scale social media. So we did the usual things. We created a website, and I have to say the website was a disaster. It was an attempt to create an interactive website to engage people. And actually all they wanted to know on the website was, you know, what's playing at what time and how do I get there? The marketing campaign also included covering the city with banners, advertising Pacific Standard Time, just to give a sense that something was going on in all parts of Southern California. And we did things such as on the opening weekend, we had buses that were wrapped with Pacific Standard Time logos. And it was really to give the sense in a sprawling region like Los Angeles that transportation was possible. Usually in Los Angeles, it's the feeling it just takes too long to get somewhere. I'm probably not going to bother doing it, even though I might be interested. And this gave the impression that it was easier to get around. Actually, very few people used this mode of transportation, but it did give that sense that you could go. We had extensive press coverage, and part of the strategy was to engage international media, invite them in, make it seem like this international must-see event, even though most of the audience you know, really was a more local audience or a national audience. As word spread of Pacific Standard Time, though, there were more and more groups, mainly art groups, the boards of major museums all over Europe that planned trips to Los Angeles to see Pacific Standard Time. Some of the more unusual things we did was create partnerships with some of our sponsors. One was Bank of America, which wound up being a terrific partner. And on every one of their ATM, their cash machines throughout the region, there was a promotion on the little video screen for Pacific Standard Time. And your little receipt that came out of the machine also advertised it. Or the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, a local coffee place, and your jacket for your coffee cup came out every time for the first few months of Pacific Standard Time promoting it. So we were blanketing the city with promotional materials. We also embarked on what we now realized was using influencers, although that was before the idea of influencers and social media. And we had three well-known figures, actor Jason Schwartzman, Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer of the band The Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the rapper and actor Ice Cube, who all chose artists to be paired with for promotional materials. Videos were created, such as Anthony Kiedis riding around Los Angeles with the artist Ed Ruscha. And those video clips were used, promoted on YouTube, which at the time didn't have the kind of eyeballs on it that it does now, but was still one of the best ways to get it out. And those promotional materials were also used on billboards and on wild postings. We also created regional weekends. Pacific Standard Time actually stretched from Santa Barbara, north of California, down to San Diego in the south. And we created regional weekends. It was really interesting to find out that many of the museums, even within one region of Los Angeles, had different opening hours. So you could want to go to an area such as Long Beach and Orange County, just south of Los Angeles, but on a regular Sunday, the museums would not even be open at the same time. For Pacific Standard Time, we got them to collaborate, to get together, to regularize their hours, which made much more sense for audiences, provided shuttle service between the venues, and they did a lot of performance festivals and highlighted public art in the region. during Pacific Standard Time. We also did food tie-ins. Food culture was very big in Los Angeles. It was the beginning of the era of food trucks with chefs that became celebrities. We invited some of these chefs to go into the museums to meet with curators to learn about the art. And each of them then created a different dish that was based on a work of art. It was the beginnings of sort of text messaging, and they texted out their locations, which were outside of museums. And if you brought a stub showing that you had been to that museum, you got a free poster and you could purchase that artwork inspired by the exhibition. So what was the impact of Pacific Standard Time, which started out as an archival project? Well, we saved a lot of archives and we processed them and we made them available to researchers. There were 68 exhibitions, 40 new scholarly publications, which were really important to us. There had been only one book that really told the history of LA art before this. There were now new publications that would be came to be used very widely. 350 oral histories were done with artists and with other key figures of the period from 1945 to 1980. And we collected all those and made them a resource that was available through our research institute at the Getty. It generated significant revenue for Los Angeles County, created almost 2,500 jobs. Most importantly, it engaged new audiences, particularly for small and mid-sized arts organizations, which had not been on the cultural map. We did a system which we called a push system. If you went to one of the larger museums that were better known, there were volunteers standing outside that would say, "You like that photography exhibition? Let me point you to 3 other photography shows that you might want to see as part of Pacific Standard Time." Or they would say, "Did you know there are 3 venues within walking distance of here that you may never have been to, and you can go and see them?" And the greatest increase in audiences was in these small and mid-sized organizations. LA also garnered new recognition for being an important city in the visual arts. As Pacific Standard Time opened, and I should say this is something that we really created by the seat of our pants before we went along. We did this. We had never done this kind of marketing and communications campaign, so it was something very new for us. And as Pacific Standard Time opened in 2011, it quickly became clear that it was not a question of if there would be another one. This was meant as a one-time event, but rather when the next one would be. And the question for us became how to maintain the spontaneity, the messiness, the bottom-up approach that told many different histories from many different perspectives during Pacific Standard Time. You could also, often see one artist in several different shows and see very different interpretations of that work and very different contexts of the artist's career. How could we maintain a focus on scholarship, on creating new scholarship was important to us? How could we maintain that diverse, new, often younger audience that participated? How could we create this sense of a grand public art work of itself that spilled out into the streets of Los Angeles? And it now became something a little bit different. It now became a collaboration in search of a theme. And so for the second Pacific Standard Time, the collaborating museums all got together and decided not to explore just another part of Los Angeles art, but to create something that was called LALA. That was an exploration of Latin American and Latino visual art in dialogue with Los Angeles. Los Angeles is actually a Latin American city of long origin. It was born in 1781 as part of New Spain, and nearly half the citizens of Los Angeles trace their heritage to Latin America. And PST LALA opened in 2017 at a very different political moment than the first Pacific Standard Time had opened. It opened at a moment where the political discourse in the United States was filled with talk of borders and walls and putting up those borders and walls. LALA included more than 70 exhibitions at museums and visual arts organizations throughout Southern California. More than half of them supported by Getty grants, plus hundreds of public programs and much more performing arts and public art than the first Pacific Standard Time, and also the participation of 65 local galleries. It actually energized the city at a moment of profound political dislocation, with many of the exhibitions taking on critical issues of racism, migration, and borders, which was actually reflected in the art of the past and of the present. It's not as if we had planned this for the Trump era. Planning began 4 years before, but it hit at a very poignant moment and created a kind of political catharsis for the city. Public murals, particularly murals of the Chicano art movement, were spotlighted, and a few important ones rescued by the museums during Pacific Standard Time and brought into public view. It again had a very energetic performance art festival, much of it also with a political focus. And this time we took advantage of public spaces even more. We launched Pacific Standard Time at one of our largest parks, Grand Park in Los Angeles, with lots of participatory art events. We also created a much more robust educational program with teacher resource guides, training for teachers so that they'd be prepared to take students to the exhibitions. And 50,000 students did field trips and family days to these exhibitions. It again had, the PowerPoint doesn't want to seem to progress anymore.
Maybe try to stop sharing and then share again.
Yeah, I think this kind of like basic tries could work.
Yes, and if not, I'm just about at the end anyway. Just going to show you the tiniest little video preview of, okay. It is not letting me even.
If you have maybe a web link, you can share it with us and I can try to share my screen.
You know, it's really not here. Maybe if I can get out of it this way. Here we go. Can you see that?
Okay.
Is it sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we are in 2024, will be the next Pacific Standard Time. Again, a radical departure in the subject matter. It's going to be on the intersections of art and science in a global dimension, and a little tiny video that, if it plays, will give you a
biotechnology, artificial intelligence, pandemics, climate change, environmental justice. These are the issues of our age. Pacific Standard Time, the iconic cultural event, will weave together science and art to confront today's urgent problems and shape new visions of our past and future through curiosity, creativity, and community. Join the conversation as Pacific Standard Time unfolds.
So I think you can see that this is a very different idea of what public art is. But I have to say that the debates over public art that have been taking place are informing our thinking and really have us concentrating on what that public art dimension is going to be for this next Pacific Standard Time. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Joanne. As you know, for the first edition of Pacific Standard Time, I was a scholar at the Getty, and I was really impressed by this huge project, which was connecting the territory in an unprecedented way. And I remember going back to Milan and talking to the Chancellor of the Arts and saying, this is the model we should, you know, aspire to. So it was great to hear about it. Our second keynote speaker is Princess Marilyn Dwala Mangabell. Princess Marilyn is co-founder of the Dwala Art Contemporary Art Center in Dwala, which opened in 1991, and is committed to the future of African museums and the restitution of cultural artifacts from colonial context. In 2016, she took part as African expert in a conference held by the Goethe Institute Johannesburg on the conception of the Humboldt Forum. In 2019, she co-curated the project Burden of Memory at the Goethe Institute Yaoundé, which brought together artistic exploration of German colonial rule in Africa from various African countries. Her most recent initiatives included the exhibition project Cameroon Stat, which tours the schools in Cameroon with an accompanying educational program. Welcome, Princess Marilyn Dwala Mangabell.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so I have some problems with my laptop. So I'm going to read the text. I send you some pictures, few pictures. So as you were told, I'm living, working, fighting for art and culture in Cameroon. And I have been asked to introduce some reflections around the social roles of public art. So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of my reflections, as Dwala Art is a laboratory which has been experimenting for 30 years the interpenetration of art in, with, for, and by neophytes population. Intervening in the public area has been part of the DNA of the Dwank Art Contemporary Art Center since its inception in 1991. This conversation will undoubtedly help me revisiting what has been done and how it has been done. I will sometimes rely on concrete examples of achievements. Obviously, all my observations are anchored in the context of our field of experimentation, namely Cameroon, and more particularly Dwala, a city that remains extremely poor in cultural facilities. It's a quasi-desert. In fact, public art, whether permanent or ephemeral, is one of the few possibilities to give millions of residents in Cameroon access to contemporary creation. The Salon Urbain de Dwala Sud, a triennial festival that was active from 2007 till 2017, as the 2020 edition was cancelled due to the pandemic, has been an extraordinary tool to increase the number of signs in the city. Its particularity is to offer to the inhabitants a differential reading of their city, to propose them crossed and sensitive insights of international artists on precise curatorial lines, namely the issues raised by each Sud edition, and the titles of each edition is The first one was The City in All Its States, SUIT 2017. Water and the City, SUIT 2010. Dwala Metamorphosis, SUIT 2013. The Human Dimension, SUIT 2017. Are you okay with me?
Yes, Princess,
Oh,
we can hear you very well.
Can you hear me? I switch off the camera.
Yeah,
is that correct?
that's okay. It's okay. Thank you.
So, through the multitude of artworks offered by Dwank Art, about 100 in the city of Dwala, public art shapes the space, arouses popular curiosity, decompartmentalizes the strata of society, frees speech, and provokes a growing interest in works of the mind embedded by artistic gestures stamped with symbolism, poetics, and rich content. I would like to specify that Dwala art is part of this school of thought which dedicates to the artistic gesture a function of mediation. Our art center laboratory accompanies artists who incorporate elements of the environment in which the project will be implemented. It can be the shape of the space, the incorporation of words, or energy of the people who lives around. It can be also the history of the location, its sociology, its geography. The gesture of creation becomes a path in which each artist feeds on the identity of a site. Let me try again. The gesture of creation becomes a path in which each artist feeds on the identity of a site, but at the same time contributes to build this identity. As the collective identity is a quest, the more people are faced to signs, rituals, and others, the more they will understand who they are, where they are. At the end of the journey, the works of art succeed in resonating with the physical or human environment in which they are anchored. The challenge the public on existential questions or on memory or any other nature. So I just sent the pictures. I don't know if you get it, Marina.
You sent them by email?
Yes.
Okay, let me check. I tried a few minutes ago and I didn't find them. Okay. Let me check again.
Okay. Maybe I can try to share my.
Yeah, I mean, I have them. Yeah.
Okay, Marina. So you can share them on your screen.
Let me check.
So those are a few, not so much, but a few examples. I say that we have offered about 100. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Ready? Okay, so this one is one of the examples. This first example is an artwork signed by the artist Joseph Francis Soumenier. The title is La Nouvelle Liberté, and it has been offered in 1996. The character, made up of salvaged materials from everyday life, has removed the sense of shame from millions of Cameroonians whose daily survival economy is based on recycled objects. So, with nothing at all, we can do great things. This is one of the expressions of people who recognize themselves and the way they are living and the way they are surviving through this artwork. And this is one of the resonance. There's a lot others, but this monumental sculpture has become the emblem of the city, and any Cameroonian who sees it recognizes himself in it. The artwork values the habits, the behaviors of this 21st century, and at the same time, it consecrates people in the way they are doing. And it's kind of pride for these people. The second example, next picture, let me see if you are together. Next. We have two pictures of this artwork, this one and next one. Those two artworks are the representation of what has been called by people in the field, by people in the neighborhood. This is in one specific neighborhood in Dwala. The title of this artwork is the Didier Schaub Theater SARS. This is an artwork which has been created by the artist Philippe Aguirre Yotegi in 2013. And this artist respected the ergonomics of the highly eroded and dangerous site, secured it. Doing so, he secured its primary function of access to drinking water. At the beginning, this area was dedicated for water. And creating this theater, open-air theater, it turned the space in another use into an open-air cultural facility, a playground for young people, and an agora for a large number of inhabitants. Those inhabitants are so proud of it, of this artistic project, that we will use them as human beings, whereas until now they considered themselves at the dregs of urban society, living in a place devoid of value and identity. They now are able to welcome visitors in their neighborhoods, which is completely abandoned by all public services, but they can now host those visitors as equals without any violence or aggressivity. A third example, next. And I would like to go quickly on this artwork from Pascal Martin Taillou, which is called La Colonne Pascal, and which is done with pans. And it's like a gesture, he sent the pans in the air and they became a column. And this artwork has opened a field of reminiscences thanks to the pans, which are now on the way to be forgotten, which are now pans remaining past gesture, past way with the mummies when they were hosting people in houses, putting water or rice or food in those pans. Nowadays, they are no more used or little used due to the products of globalization that supplant local materials. Oh, look, these are pans that our mother used before. So there is something about the reminiscence of what was the kind of behavior and the heat of the way the mothers, the mummies were hosting people. And okay. And the way he did this artwork is also a discussion with the surrounding, because the column in this vertical way of standing is in contradiction with the horizontal settlement around. And this is also a way for people to say, well, we are not so big. And this is also a discussion about who they are and how they stand in the middle, in the surrounding. The last one, as a final example, the artwork article 1 of Mustafa Akrim, a Moroccan artist, were hosted last edition of Sud, and it is extracted few words in the Universal Human Declaration, Human Rights Declaration, and he hung them on the facade of a school, an high school, which is technical, specifically technical, and all the people and the directors, the responsible of this high school, technical high school, decided to teach civics at the foot of this artwork to train kids in for citizenship education. So there is interior-exterior relation. Kids are inside, but when they have to get these notions of citizenship education, they are going outside. And a lot of people walking in the street stand there and are questioning what does it mean, and the links between the different words ask to people an exercise to link them and to try to be conscious of something which is about citizenship and rights, human rights. Then this was the final example, the last one. And then the artwork is a carrier of discourse and gives meanings to the physical or human space. More widely, it facilitates a sharing, better, let's say, in a better way, a mixing of languages, tongues, and imaginary. It participates a lot in a fusion of vocabularies while leaving to each one its freedom of opinion. You may know that the day after the day of the implementation, the artistic piece in the urban social sphere is widely interpreted and commented, all broadcasted by all types of media, from the classical ones to those conveying by the rumor. The discussions are huge, are very, a lot of people are speaking about that. It's a buzz, it makes a buzz. All that artwork, the new one, putting the city inside the city, is at the heart of formal or informal conversation. And by these languages, which are untied, mixed, a process of collective appropriation is set up. The next day, the day after, each artwork becomes commonplace, melting into the public space by being seen, well, because being seen day after day in the same place. It is no more an event. It's included in the normal day, the normal space. But the set of pieces of all the artwork in the city constitutes a puzzle that establishes a mental geography made of signs, symbols, and landmarks offered by the artists in the city, participating in the making of a singular aesthetics and therefore an identity to the city. Making it short, Dwala invites artists to intervene in 3 types of space. The first area, the first space, is the one controlled by urban planners. It's a reference, for example, of the new La Nouvelle Liberté de Soumenier or La Colonne Pascale de Pascal Martin Taillou. Those artworks has been implemented in real controlled areas by urban planners. Those are open spaces, generally very structured, surrounded by dwellings that meet precise standards. The signs that are inscribed here are generally by the politics, monuments that make visible facts or characters from social or political history in which people are completely indifferent or in which they do not recognize themselves. And the way we are working Dwak Art, as Dwak Art and this laboratory, putting objects or artworks on the field fall outside the register of the politics. And that artwork, the way the process is the result of negotiations to get authorization, to obtain authorization, and to get out of the social control. As you saw for the New Liberty, it has been a very big fight. La Nouvelle Liberté de Soumenier, or the one of Pascal Martin Taillou, also a lot of negotiation to obtain the authorization and to put people in such a way that they are looking at something which is kind of resonance for themselves, inside themselves. The second area, the second type, is the area not articulated to the big city and which has been built with bare hands. It is a territory without identity whose raison d'être is to accommodate the galloping demography. It doesn't have any basic infrastructure linked to the principle of urbanism. No water, no electricity, no roads, nothing. As the one you saw with Philippe Aguirre Yotegi, the source, the theater source. It doesn't, the decision chain for this artistic intervention involves the micro-local authority and the adhesion of the resident of the district or the neighborhood. The art that takes place there is an absolutely non-governmental decision. It does belong to people, and they are really part of the ownership of this artwork, this kind of artwork in the place where they live, where each day they are going outside and back to their works, jobs. The third type is an intermediate space managed according to strict rules, like the schools, the schoolyard, for example, and the work I've shown of Mustafa Akrim, the first article of the Human Rights Declaration. Or if it's not specific fixed spaces managed with strict rules, can be self-managed by populations who preserve one site because of necessity. For example, vacant lots, lot for sports, the water source, as the example of Philippe Aguirre and the theater. Here, artistic interventions are generally the result of multitude of negotiations involving very complex levels of decision-making, integrating different managers of the space. That means that the question of social area and art in social area is not almost only a question of artwork. It's really processes, and including in that processes to involve and sometimes commit people who has portion of power in the space, and including involving those kinds of persons. The artwork is widely, let's say, known, used, and practiced by people. Whatever the typology, oops, something is happening in my machine, sorry. I've got a problem now. Oh, no, something is happening.
I can still hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Everything seems okay.
Okay, but I have a little problem with my laptop now. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to find a quick solution.
Okay. By the way, please consider that we are keeping hearing you very well.
Sorry?
We keep hearing you very well.
Ah, thank you. Good. Good thing. But let me try to get. Oh, I don't know what's going on, but there is something which is happening in my screen. I just have 1 or 2 paragraph, 2 more paragraph, and This is the problem of the technology.
Yeah, I'm sorry. By the way, I take the opportunity to thank you for your envisioning speech and for really giving us the wide reach of the power of public art. So I was really amazed by the example you showed us.
So I'm going to try to do something. It will be strange, but let me try to go further. Whatever the typology of the intervention, of the space of intervention, the work commissioned by Dwak Art provides the opportunity to express an opinion or an appreciation by the audience. And it helps to have, for them, to give them a free will and let's say a critical sense. And it's in the street, it's where they live, where the way they crosses each day. And they have this opportunity in a country where the speeches are really controlled, to have the freedom of their own sense of things through the artworks. The artistic act will make it, will give a meaning, animate the space, give it a soul. The work, and you may know that the city of Dwala is also the economic capital of Cameroon, and the one who have money, the one who have power, have nothing to do with art and culture. Then these art in the open air field give meanings to the city, give animated, give soul. The artwork, the work of public art enters in resonance with a site or a population. It is these people the people are the ones who amplify its cultural value. Not me, not Dwank Art, but the way they are using it amplify the cultural value. The contemporary artistic creations implemented in the urban social space take part in the birth of a new and pictorial vocabulary around elements thanks to which it is possible to locate oneself and by which one can collectively be identified. Well, I think this sentence has no sense because it's a translation from French, but I want to say that the artwork, the art creation as an artwork, as not as an artwork, as an art process, a project, as this faculty to develop social vocabulary because of the comments of people, and around also materials that people knows and can identify, and that doing so, the sharing of vocabularies, of thoughts, of impressions, help those people to start to identify that they are part of the same story. They are sharing those different imaginaries, but around an artwork, and they start to create a collective, collective identity. These constitute the premises of a cultural development, of a shared identity. It is the starting point of a new social inclusion, even societal, as and this is something very important, but the expression is not so good. I mean, there is something which is very interesting with artwork in the social field, in the city. It's that we can concentrate a lot of people at the moment of the inauguration or all along the implementation of the artwork. And this is a way to stimulate conversation, of course, and at the same time, the idea that of belonging to the same history, narrative. And this is exactly, if we have to take an example in the ancestral past, is exactly the same impact, let's say, for the new urban cultures, the same impact as the mask where they were getting out in certain rituals, you know. The concentration, the crystallization of people on something which can be emotional, can be just poetic or fairy, all kind of art emotion is part of starting to create the idea of a societal behavior.
Thank you, Princess. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but we need to start the round table at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And there is Marina Pujas who is going to bring us a brief intervention from the missing speaker. So sorry not to have Miss on with us.
Conclude. Here's my conclusion.
Yes, thank you.
The city becomes a museum because it speaks landmarks, reference points, including in the city. And it becomes a museum, especially if there is permanence of activism, because it's not the fixed museum, it's not something which is cold, it's not something which is established, but it's changed all the time and help people to have new references and so So the necessity is to pursue those stimuli, but I just want to end quickly to say that the question of the museum, we have an example of city as a museum, as I told you, with the geographical and mental map for people. But the last word is to say, we also have to work of this question of intimate setting for hosting, housing, and preserve precious objects and gestures. So we have to work also in this idea of interior, exterior, outdoor, indoor museums, which help people to recognize that they are part of the same history and belong to the future of their city and their society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Princess Marilyn. I think the work you have done with Dwala Art is magnificent, and I think your words were very, very meaningful, beginning with the idea that public art gives the possibility to access to contemporary art to people, and also the fact that the creative gesture becomes a path which then has to be inherited by the community. So our third and last keynote speaker, Kim Ong, who is the head and curator of the Biennale and residencies at Singapore Art Museum, unfortunately is not doing well and has been hospitalized. She was already not doing well yesterday when we tried the technical features, and she will send us a text later on. At this point, we are rightly on time for jumping off to the round table. So the round table includes our ICOM colleagues, Christian Nana Chuiseu, Chair of ICOM Cameroon, Mrs. Beate Reifenscheid, Chair of ICOM Germany, Trilce Navarrete, Chair of CEDOC, the ICOM Committee for Documentation, Nicole van Dijk, Board Member of CAMOC, the ICOM Committee for the Museums of the City, and Nicole Mulhuisen, Board Member of ICFA, the ICOM Committee for the Museums of Fine Arts. Barbara, can you please mute the microphones to the people who are not involved? They are already, they are already muted, and I invite both the keynote speakers and our ICOM representatives for a talk, and I would start with a question about how do you envision the relationship between public art and museums? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Marina, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry.
I just wanted to tell you that I think Dr. Navarrete had some problem in joining us. So
okay.
I don't see her in the list of participants. I'm trying to reach her by mail and let you know.
Oh, I'm here. I'm sorry. I must have done something wrong. I'm trying to contact my camera, but I'm here.
Okay, great. If the ICOM colleagues could turn also their cameras on, I think this would help in the conversation. I don't know if there's a function. I don't know this platform very well.
Yeah,
so
you can choose the only active cameras. If you go on the drop-down menu, you can see on the upper part of the screen. You can visualize just the speaker or all the people attending or just the active cameras. I suggest for the round table to have this last option.
No, I had another question, Barbara. I was wondering whether there's a function such as raising hands for questions, so not to overlap one another.
There is not. So we will be like polite, like raising physically our hand or just opening our microphone. For the audience, I ask them again to put the questions on the chat. And about questions. Maybe we can ask the audience if they have any regarding this first part of the meeting, regarding the 2 keynote speeches, and we can read them, obviously, but you are free to start, Marina. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. So as said, I would love to hear from the colleagues and the keynote speakers how they see the relationship between public art and museums, if they see this need for more porosity as a positive thing, if they see there's a dichotomy, or there could be, you know, more collaboration or a complementarity between the 2 fields. So whoever wants to begin. Tom.
So Marina, I think that's like the key question. You know, what value can an international network like ICOM bring to this realm of public art? And as you so beautifully said in your opening, this relationship of art in piazza, or the scenography of urban living, predates the existence of the idea of a museum. And in some ways, as we give back to the public a casual and familiar, quotidian access to culture, I think that you know, we actually have a big challenge, despite all the great achievements that happen. Public art still exists as very much a localized phenomenon. You know, quite famously in this country, in the United States, there have been, you know, successive movements to have a so-called Percent for Art program. That means that any major real estate development or any university campus development will devote some effort not just to more thoughtful architecture, but also to art that becomes part of the public experience. And that can get fragmented down to, you know, a neighborhood. It can be very discordant from one place to another. And wouldn't it be great if we had a professional learning network like ICOM to understand best practices, to benefit from the experiences of colleagues the world over at every scale, and dealing with the myriad challenges that one finds in your own neighborhood.
Thank you so much, Tom. I have to tell you that when we funded the Public Art Office for the City of Milan, I felt the need of sharing policies and best practices with other cities, and so I began interviewing other heads of public arts in Italy first, and then in Europe, and then in other continents. And it turns out exactly what you're saying. There are no shared guidelines. Every city does, you know, has a different policy, and so we need, you know, a shared guidelines. So that's, at least that's what I feel like. So somebody else wants to step in? I see Nicole with an open mic.
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so maybe I can address the question from the perspective of fine art museums, and I think that most surely the idea of envisioning museums as more like porous environment in relation to the context is surely
Nicole, your voice is freezing a little bit. Maybe try to turn off your camera.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because your connection is not stable, so we cannot hear you. I'm sorry. Okay, we just lost her. But yeah, I see that Beate and Christian already raised their hands. So and Nicole Van Dijk as well.
Fine art museums,
okay, so I will go
because
in this.
Hold on a second. Nicole is still speaking. Nicole, we cannot hear you.
I'm trying to
be
mute
focused
her.
more on collections and on the inside.
Then
okay, So I
Okay.
just muted Nicole and trying to reach her via WhatsApp. So
Great.
I'm sorry if I'm right or not in the order because I was taking care of this, but I think there were like I'm not sure, but Nicole van Dijk, Christian Nana, and Beate Reifenscheid. So
Okay.
please, and then Trilce Navarrete. Thank you for accepting this order.
Okay. Well, hello all, and thank you all the keynote speakers for your interesting speeches. From the point of view of CAMOC, I represented the city museums, the public realm and culture in the streets of our cities is extremely important. And of course, city museums are working already often in the public realm. And so I would like to enlarge this discussion a bit, but not only public art, but culture in the streets as like heritage and community projects regarding heritage and identity is important for us, for the city museums, of course, as well. I have to make a remark that as I know, a few examples of city museums really working very hard and keen about projects in the public realm, and which were, so to say, by the funders, they decided to stop those projects because it was not inside the walls of the museums, and so visitors could not be counted. So it has some problems, I think, for museums, the way we solve this problem. And also, for example, the City Museum in Mechelen had the same challenge, is to raise a foundation which is mainly working on this more social issues in the city expressed in the public realm, but collaborating with the museum. This is a very sort of technical and financial discussion, but I think very important for a lot of less big museums, I would say. The other thing I would like to address, that culture and art in the public realm is extremely important to address the public familiarity of people and giving people a sense of being at home, and it can enlarge resiliency very much. So the importance of it is without any doubt. The only question is of how to process it in the best possible way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I believe your contribution is particularly significant because the city museums obviously have an experience, a real experience on the territory, and are really linked to the city itself and to the public space. So for sure, this is, for instance, a form of comparison and a form of discussion we would have to have necessarily. Barbara, I don't remember the order after. I'll let this to you.
I think it was Christian, and in the meanwhile we are trying to retrieve Nicole. And okay. But okay, Christian, please go ahead, and maybe after you we will try to get her back.
All right. Are you hearing me? Is it okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara, for this to invite me. I thank ICOM, and especially ICOM Italy, to join me to this roundtable. It's very important. I know Nicole because we have working several times in CAMOC because I'm also board members of CAMOC. You know that to talk about museums, public art, and city is very important, because we in Africa, city museum is a new concept. That is a new concept for us, because we have ethnographical museums and other museums, but city museum is a new concept, and we have to integrate it in our programs. That is very important. I try to implement it here with some colleagues, because it's very important to have this notion, but I think that we have to go slowly to explain things to the people, because I was very happy with the presentation of Marilyn, Dwala Art, because she presents very well the situation of public arts here in Cameroon. But now we have to, because the museums is for me, is a co-creative space. We have to move to the room, to move to another place, to open space place, and let people know what happened in the museums. What I'm trying to do today, because we are talking about restitution, decolonizations, and other questions about museums and interest. But for me, the first thing that we should do is to restitute our memories. How we can restitute our memories? Because the city, before to be the city was a small town. There was a small village, because they are going in the progress. So now, if you want to have more people in the museums, interest artists also, we have to explain this to them. We have to integrate them to the activities and programs. That is very important for me. I think that before the lockdown of the museums here in Cameroon, I was launched a program called it Class de Musée. It's a museum class. This why? Because museums should be near of the kids, because it's very important. If you want to educate and to integrate this this notion, we have to educate the young children to come to the museums, explain to them the history of the city, integrate also small programs who will help them to know that the city was not at the same place in 2020 than today. We moved to 2021. We have had something new in our city environment. So for me, it's very important to also have a personnel working in the museums, because here in Africa, that is also the problem that we have. I'm working in the museum more than 20 years ago now, but the problem is that we need to have more people who will be interested to be professional, to work in the museums, and to be able to make the activities and programs who will interest most of people. Migration is a very good question also. So we are moving to one place to another place. Even in Cameroon, we have for a region who is not secure now. People are moving to those places to the city where I'm in Yaoundé, it's the capital of Cameroon. So it's very important to integrate all those notions. So that is my first intervention. I will come later.
Thank you, Christian. I'm not sure if you finished your intervention, because I saw you freezed. Okay, now you're back now. Okay. So Professor Reifenschneider, if you mind, we will try to reach again Nicole Muisen. Nicole?
Okay, can you hear me, Barbara?
Yes, now we hear you very well.
But I'm not taking the video on just to make sure the connection can work. And I will answer the question from the perspective of fine art museums, saying that the keynote speeches and the concepts that were laid out today are, I think, of enormous relevance for the debate of fine art museums, and especially the key annual conferences that were held in the last 6 years by ICOM also perhaps have prepared us, I think, to address this question. In fact, during the general conference, which was held in Rio de Janeiro, emphasis was being put on the link between museums, their locations, and social groups, and that encouraged museum professionals to direct their focus of their gaze not only to the materiality of collections, but also to memory and people. After in 2016, during the conference on museums and cultural landscape, which was held in Milan, it was another occasion to reflect on the social role of museums and their relationship with the outside context. And in the context of fine art, we reflected on the multi-layered significances of fine art and the opportunities of involving communities through interpretation and management practice. This is to say that the themes discussing today are important for fine art museum, especially because the examples of fine art museum working productively with public art are perhaps an exception rather than the norm. And fine art museums tend to derive their values and their operational frameworks from traditional art historical criteria, whereas traditional scholarship perhaps counts more than collective meaning. And during the pandemic, we have all witnessed how educators, for example, have been considered more disposable than curators and suffered severely from precarity, a precarity which perhaps also still reveal the hierarchies of value that are often present in fine art museums, which tend to be object focused, and this way of seeing the world is sometimes also reflected in interpretation and display criteria. So hopefully a commission dedicated to public art would most certainly trigger us in keeping questions of democracy, accessibility, and public use at the heart of what we do. And also the history of fine art museums and collections is strongly intertwined with that of the external cultural landscape. So perhaps they could also play a generative role in the development of participatory cultural districts. I also see some cultural, like some ethical dilemmas intertwined with the creation of an IC dedicated to public art, which can be productive in helping us to think about the ethical dilemmas we face today in the management of museum, but perhaps there will be more space for that after. So here I finish. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Nicole. If Marina agrees, there is a question that is specifically related to fine arts. So I think it's good to address it to you, Nicole, but obviously to all the other participants. Marina, are you okay if we read the question of Virginia Carey?
Sure, absolutely.
So she's asking, do we differentiate between traditional public art and the much more problematic concern of political art in the guise of fine art? Nicole, do you want to make a reply on this, or do we open the answer to everybody, to all the other speakers?
I think a collective input would be interesting, to be honest, but as you prefer.
I see John Weinstein asking to speak. I will be glad to give her the floor.
Yeah, I guess part of my response to that question would be all art is political art. So I guess I don't see any differentiation there. But what I think public art, it presents a certain challenge to the museum, which I think is a productive and healthy one. I think we can't, all museums are not made the same and all public art is not made the same. So, I look at public art within the United States, and oftentimes it's some of the most anodyne art that is built by consensus of certain civic leaders or real estate developers and does not involve community whatsoever. So, there is no monolithic public art. There are no monolithic museum cultures. And so I think, but I do think that public art really, this focus on public art sharpens the kind of debate about the social responsibility of museums. And I think it leads to all sorts of interesting questions that we have about social identity, even. I think of a city like Los Angeles, which is so different than a situation that Princess Marilyn was describing, where you're trying to create some, where there is perhaps a more collective identity in some place, but in Los Angeles, it's about exploding that idea of a collective identity. And there's been a sense of collective identity that has been established by predominant, white culture. and propagated as a universal, social identity. And so I think part of what I liked about Pacific Standard Time was this multiplicity of viewpoints, that even though certain institutions were asserting a kind of identity, they were all in dialogue and conflict with one another. So I'm always to exposing those contradictions, and I think part of the discussion of public art actually exposes all those contradictions in interesting ways.
Thank you so much, Joan. I have a suggestion, Barbara. Since we have another interesting question, so why don't we alternate one question to the round table and one question from the public. Otherwise, we would deviate completely, from the first topic of the discussion. Also, there's an echo, so I would remind everybody. Okay, the echo is gone. Everybody who's not talking to mute their mic. So, who was up next?
Beate.
Yes? Beate.
Please go ahead, and thank you for your patience.
Okay, first have to switch on my microphone. Thank you so much. And also thank you for the discussion. I think the topic is very complex. And what I'm still a little bit missing is the way how we talk about art in public, public art and public spaces. And then also the role of the museums. I believe that the role of the museums in the perspective of public art is quite difficult, because museums are, first of all, they are of course a public space in a way. They are open for the public, but they not always interact with public spaces. So they are mainly focused on their own buildings, and whenever they want to reach out, it's a long history of formulas of communication with the city municipality, respecting special laws and so forth. So what can the museum do to interact with the audience? And also the audience of the city is mainly a different one than the audience which normally comes to a museum. It could be, but it must not be the same group. So it's more or less different groups which mainly could join. And the good thing of maybe even of this horrible pandemic could be that the civic community is now being aware that culture, in any case, in any sphere of culture, is important for themselves, to define themselves, to find themselves, and to promote what they really want to express. So for me, the point is, how can museums interact with this community? How can they possibly even guideline this, and how to find also fundings to enable the community, but also the museum, to express themselves. So we were talking a lot about public art. Public art does not mean in itself that it's really an artwork which is respected by the public. This could be if it's for example, if it's just put there by some politicians or by somebody who is a big spender, wants just to bring a sculpture somewhere, it could be very critical, and could be as we have seen, for example, in many places in America, it could be too political, and so it might be even destroyed because it's too aggressive for special groups. So how can we handle all these in the point of view of museums? And I still believe that museums could help and support to find guidelines, but they are not the only ones to speak about. I really would like to be more open for the ideas of the public and the society where museums are within. So each city, even each village has its own society, and they have to find out which is the best and the best practice. I'm not talking about these major art fairs or like biennials. I'm really talking about what's brought up by the community itself, and I think that's important, and that also would help museums to be more attractive. So we can, on both sides, we can gain a lot, but it's still, I think it's a long process to really to define what is public art and what could be public spaces, even to find out what is a public space, which is a good space to be creative and to engage also the community.
Thank you so much. I have a proposal for you, Marina. As Trilce Navarrete is patiently waiting, and she is the last speaker of this round table, maybe we can finish with her and then go to the question. Okay.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you, Barbara. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the opportunity to join from CEDOC, the International Committee on Documentation, and listening to, well, thank you also for the invitation on this topic that when I read the invitation, I said, we want to be there. I would like to respond using two hats. So as in my role as part of the board as secretary of CEDOC, but perhaps also a little bit as part as an individual. I'm a researcher at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, and my area of research is the economics of heritage, and I see lots of potential here. So I would like to make maybe three main points. So when the idea came to create a new international committee on public art, I think this raises some interesting questions that have been brought up, but also quite a bit of potential to solve some of the issues that we have encountered in the past, I will say. First of all is the accessibility of art. Museums have a history of trying to increase the accessibility of their collections, and what better way than bringing the museum to the streets. This is quite an old concept that many countries and many institutions have tried in order to lower the challenges raised or perceived by some communities to coming into the museum. And so I see here a very nice synergy of museums working with public art. The question comes then on who manages this and how is this managed. Some of these questions have been raised before, and I have to think of the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the Sustainable Development Goals, 11th, focuses on sustainable urban development, specifically with heritage at its core as the solution, as a proposition to get further. And we've had actually some students doing research on this, on how, to what extent this availability of the public art create a new sense of community to engage, this is in the letter, to redesign the urban spaces, but also to empower these social communities and the role of museums in their communities. So I see that as quite a powerful potential idea there. In my research, and here I have my researcher's hat as I go on this, as a researcher, we have discussed the whole role of communities to ensure sustainability of culture. It is very difficult to expect from a European perspective to have taxpayers always fund these cultural projects. There's just so much that needs to be done. In the US, there's another model, and there's different models to support art, but we know that the strongest way for a sustainable and healthy cultural environment is when individuals are part of this, to be part of culture, therefore transmit culture, but also caring for it to ensure is transferred to the future generations. And then I take my CEDOC hat back, and I have to say that yes, also on the management of this is quite challenging. So all of our museums are struggling with documentation of the collections. And so to think, oh no, a new collection, oh no, how are we going to go about this? But again, pulling the community, we understand that it's impossible to have museums internally document everything. It's just manpower not possible. And so the solutions are to involve the community, to do crowds organizations, hackathons. There's several names on these things. From CEDOC, we support inclusive documentation, and this has two levels. On the one hand, we include the community to share their knowledge about collections at different levels, as well as join in the efforts to make sure that the histories of our collections are well preserved for future generations in as complete and as diverse way possible. And then perhaps just going back to my researcher's hat, this whole notion on including communities is a new trend within economics. It's a new area of study within us cultural economists. The notion of urban commons or the heritage commons is perhaps not new, but the way that we go about it is relatively novel, in that, and actually there's lots of Italian colleagues that are leading these projects to say, again, in terms of financing, it is through these communities that we can get further, including the documentation part. So I will be very happy to support the consideration of the creation of a new international committee on public art that could work together with museums precisely to support strengthening this bridge to beyond the institutional walls. Thank you.
I would say, wow, thank you so much. Marina, may I ask you something? With this respect, would you mind giving us some insights of what the Minister of Culture, the Italian Minister of Culture, is doing through the Scuola del Patrimonio with the working groups? Because I think one of those is strictly related to documentation on public art. But I would like you, if you can, give a general overview on these working groups.
Yeah. It's been a few months that the Ministry for Culture and this School for the Heritage, which is part of the Ministry of Culture, have promoted an in-depth analysis of public art through various focus groups. For instance, I'm in the focus group of best practices and policies, because it's a work I began with Milan, as told you, in comparison. But then there's a group focusing on conservation, one on documentation, one in promotion, and one in theoretical issues, which basically encompass everything, from an analysis of the audience, the typologies of practices, the change in the realm of public art, from the 70s to now, and from monumental art to more ephemeral forms of contemporary art. And so this will bring to some guidelines and a conference which will take place in January. Unfortunately, it's just an Italian analysis. So at the moment we don't have an international platform, but maybe the next step will be to open to other to an international platform. And I have to say that we might have invited today also ICOM CC, for instance, or other international committees, because really for each of the topics, from documentation to conservation to the promotion and communication and the analysis of the public. I mean, public art is so complex and so much left, to single municipalities as a solution. There's not, very much form of exchange. Like, for instance, in the US, I know there's a network, but in Europe we don't have any network. There's a network which unites a group of cities, and here we have the representative, the chair of that group, which is Daniel Bürkner, who is the head of public art for Munich. And I have to say, like, Germany has by far, up to what I have seen, one of the best policies and best practices, Germany, Munich, I would say, in monuments, revising and thinking about how to produce public art. But it's very, it's very scattered. It's very different. It's very, and I really feel the need for more comparison, more sharing, more debate in all the different, fields, which make, the complexity of cultural heritage. And in my view, public art is an open air museum with all the problematics that museums have, if not more.
I would like to thank you all. As ICOM Italy, I'm in direct line, so to say, with my president. So she is really excited about the discussion, and she's thanking you all as well. So we are taking notes. So obviously everything will be taken into consideration on how to promote this confrontation at an international level. Even, I mean, besides the idea of proposing an international committee on the subject, because we all know that in a few months we all gather in Prague for the ICOM General Conference. It will be August 2022, and obviously it would be super great to reach that important appointment with a proposal. So as ICOM Italy, we are at your disposal to put on the ground, so to say, the milestones that today we discussed in order to propose the idea to other committees all around the world. I would like just to point out that we totally agree on the fact that it's a sort of win-win situation. So people who work on public art can really benefit on a more effective relationship with museums and vice versa. And but I really agree with what Beate said. I'm missing her camera, but I think she's still connected. And it's a topic we discussed with Tom before starting the meeting, that really each city, not each country, not each region, but each city is different on this topic. It has different processes and different feelings about this subject. The other thing I would like to put on the table is related to another aspect that came out, I think, with Beate as well, with the concept of what's inside the museum and what's off-site. So we consider very often this kind of topic related to the online presence of a museum with respect to the offline presence, and the same about the on-site presence. So when a visitor is visiting us, but all the visitors experience pre and post visiting us, so outside the museums. So these are sort of coordinates that I think could really fit with the discussion we are having today. So sorry if I put something more on the table. I hope you can find it interesting, and if you all agree, I will read the two questions we have in the chat and then give you the floor again. So first one is not really a question, but it's more a comment from Daniel Bürkner, Public Art Munich. And he says, from the perspective of a public art program, we try to act more as a communication platform and involve several museums' expertise than becoming an institution ourselves. In my idea, public art programs and traditional museums are quite different in that respect. However, it is important to negotiate this relation in terms of mutual inspiration. So thank you for this debate. So I don't know if some of the speakers would like to intervene on this point. Please just raise your hand. Okay. So thank you, Daniel. I think it's really important what you did point out about not becoming another institution. So it's again about dialogue. So we already have institutions taking care of both sides in some way, even if what Marina pointed out is that there are several aspects of public art to be still deepened, like conservation, for example, or the one we said about documentation. Moving forward, okay, Tom, please, the floor is yours.
I mean, I think, thank you, Dana, for the comment. I think that there's a huge thing we haven't touched on, though, just to add to our list that would take us to a hard place. And that is navigating the public trust. You know, what is in the interest of the public? What is the catalytic role that art in the public realm can play in these other conversations? You know, the civic conversation. I think you know, Virginia's comment may have been about politics like overtly strident ideologies. I think if we were to edit her politics thing, because Joan's right, all art is political. But that politics is maybe better thought with a little p, right? Political, like it's part of the social fabric, it's part of the social contract, it's part of our own yearnings for community. So navigating the public trust, I think, really is one of the harder things, particularly because you know, museums as institutions have this history of talking to audiences rather than being in conversation with society. And I just offer that if that's helpful.
Marina, would you like to add something?
Well, surely it's this is a great point, and which public, what is the interest of the public? Is there a difference? I mean, I had a second question, but we're not going to have time, I guess, to go around the table with that. And it's, do you think about your public differently when you think, when you imagine the audiences for public art outside museum walls? Do we imagine different publics? And we do know that the public actually is different. And you remember I quoted Mary Jane Jacob, who talked about the unfashionable public. And I think an important point was also made by Princess Marilyn when she talked about the fact that public art, in some places, is the only way to reach out people talking about contemporary art. And so this is an aspect we have to take into consideration, that more and more the community is I mean, we have to think in extended and extroverted terms, and not just think about, you know, the city center or the elite, which mostly goes to museums. We have to expand and to diversify, and this is incredibly complicated because it involves also political problems. So this for sure, and it involves education. It involves, that's why it's also up to me. I mean, it's also so entangled, you know, because for instance, with public art, conservation has a lot to do with the sense of community. If an artwork is not, you know, accepted, is felt as something external, it will be vandalized, you know, right after. So and this is not a fact inside museums, you know, it's a totally different logic. Nicole?
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe this is also a beautiful challenge for ICOM and museums to start with a more humble attitude and working together with communities, because, well, we all know the discussion within ICOM and the position sometimes museums have in cities. And I think starting with culture, public art in the public spaces, public realm, and so working with communities, a thing you really have to do if you want to make any sense. this is a beautiful challenge for museums to sort of change the attitude.
Thank you so much for this. I totally agree, and it's a very contemporary challenge because we are requested to do so, to rediscuss our context. Joanne?
Yes, I was actually going to agree with you completely, Nicole, and I think that both sides have so much to gain and learn from one another, and it's in many ways they can help solve one another's problems as well. I've seen some really interesting collaborations locally in Los Angeles between very large museums and community-based arts organizations. And sometimes it's around the preservation of public art that is belongs to those local communities or even local arts organizations. And that in particular, some of the larger museums bring conservation expertise. That at least in Los Angeles, the municipality does not have the funding to be able to conserve those works of public art, particularly those which grew up within communities and were not, official commissions, say. And those kind of partnerships are bringing rewards to all different parties and really intense learning experiences as well to the benefit of all of them.
Absolutely. So as time is strict because it's 10 before 7, I would like to read another question in the chat from, okay, let's wait a second. Okay, Daniel, many thanks for these inspiring remarks. Thank you, Nicole Van Dijk, for pointing out the beautiful challenge that somewhat sums it up perfectly. Thank you, Daniel. And so coming to Wu Wang Jung, it says, okay, good evening, experts. I'm a PhD student in University of Bologna. My research theme is regarding the art district development and its sociological connection with the inhabitants. From the fantastic presentation you're given, I assume that the art that remain to the city's public space are well organized / invited by the local authorities some way. But there are many other freelance artists who could make less demonstration for the city public space legally, so to say, and let's say more permanently. Somehow their existences, studios, small galleries helped a lot creating an art zone district like the Montmartre in Paris or the 798 art district in Beijing. What could they bring to the art in the public space from the point of view of art growing and citizen participation? Thank you very much for this articulated and very interesting question. So who would like to reply to Wu?
Well, I think I can answer for the city of Milan at least. Definitely public art is made by many, but like a large constituency, and a lot comes, from spontaneous participation and from independent art centers or the initiative of artists. And this is what makes it more interesting, diverse, and complex to document and to, how do you keep the memory of something which is totally ephemeral and happens, in the space of one day, and that's why we need, help in envisioning and imagining strategies for making a better work, because at the end, if you think about this, public art historically has this dual poles. One is the monuments which celebrate, the power of a space of an institution, and the other is the ephemerality of murals, which mostly, have represented underrepresented communities, and those kind of works are more ephemeral. And we would love, to have more porosity, to change the idea of public art just being about monuments, and to be able to document also ephemeral forms of expression, and so to democratize the process.
Thank you, Marina. I think we are going to close this meeting. That was very interesting for me. I would like just to suggest a small thing to John. Would you consider to have like a sort of, I don't know, spin-off of your project, like maybe Milan?
We've been asked this many times. I have to say there are some other cities that have, Chicago took up the idea and consulted with us broadly, but reinterpreted it in their own way for their own city. And again, it took a foundation there, Terra Foundation, that then got some of the other local foundations to join them in doing it. The city of Philadelphia is now talking about doing this for the 250th anniversary, I guess, of the founding. And you know, doing it a little bit different way, but learning some of the lessons from just how to put on an event like this. So I think for us in Los Angeles, it's something that is evolving with each iteration as well. I have to say one of the things we've learned is really how to empower some of the community-based organizations, how to cede some of that control and authority that a larger organization, might exert, and allow for even re-granting by communities to local artists and arts organizations, and supporting that work at a much more granular community-based level.
Marina, the floor is yours for a brief conclusion if you want. In the meanwhile, Adele Maresca says hello to everybody. Unfortunately, she had to leave like 2 minutes ago, and she really thank you all.
Well, I think that, thank you so much, Barbara. I think that the words of Nicole van Dijk, the beautiful challenge, is really, the best concluding remarks we could have. I would love to accept this beautiful challenge, and hopefully with the help of ICOM Italy and all of you, we will be able to bring it up to the next step. I would love to thank everybody for the participation in this very dense symposium, and so looking forward to the next step.
Thank you very much.
Bye everybody. Thank you.